Good evening. Welcome to the August 12th, 2019 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. If you would stand with us, please, Commissioner Charlotte P. will lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Charlotte.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this opportunity to come together. Help us to make good decisions. Help us through this week. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Call the roll, please, Gail.
Charlotte P.
Here.
Chip Pinion. Here. Craig Lynch.
Here.
David Jones.
Here.
Jim Aberwater.
Here.
Lee Bogle. Mike Cush.
Present.
Mike Vaught. Pettis Reed.
Here.
Rhonda Allen.
Here.
Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Gail. At this time, we need to review and approve the minutes from our July 8th meeting, and I'll call on our Vice Chair, Mike Cush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those meeting minutes are in order. I see no corrections or alterations, so I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve our July 8th, 2019 minute meetings. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. No items withdrawn or deferred. We're ready to go. Under new business, item 6A, these are items that are rezoning requests that are scheduled for public hearings. Item 6A1 19-A013, Artavan Arfrankoth for landdevelopment.com, located on Walnut Grove Road. Commission district is 8. The county commissioner is Pettis Reed. Size of the site is approximately 48 acres. Tax map is 159. Existing zoning is PUD, planned unit development. Proposed zoning is a PUD amendment. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And good evening, Chairman Phillips and members of the Planning Commission. We've got several items for your consideration tonight, so we'll go ahead and jump on in. The first, as you stated, is for a PUD amendment to the Walnut Chase subdivision. This pattern book was originally approved by the Board of Commissioners back in April of last year, which means you would have seen it the month before in March. Preliminary plan was also considered by the Planning Commission back in August of last year, but the plan was deferred at that time to research the viability of soils on the property. If you recall, the primary concern that we had at the time was hydric soils on the property, which may not be able to support the intensity of the development that they were proposing. After review of the soils, it was determined that a large part of the property was not developable due to those soils. And because of that reason, the applicant's proposing this amendment that you have before you tonight. He's redesigning the subdivision. According to the information provided in the applicant's pattern book, they're reducing the number of lots from 100, which was originally approved, down to 37. Minimum lot size for the amendment is 7,500 square feet as compared to a range of 6,600 to 7,800 square feet on the original application. House sizes will still be 1,400 square feet and up, so that's not changed. And homes would be constructed with a variety of materials such as brick, stone, vinyl siding, cement boarding, etc. Additional information can be found on the pattern book. You do have a copy of that pattern book on your iPads tonight. The property will have access to Walnut Grove Road through the Clearview Acres subdivision, which is right to the west. This pattern book does not call for any access directly to State Route 269. There is a stub out to the east to another proposed subdivision that's conventionally zoned, Walnut Grove Farms, I believe. And those are the main access points. There will not be, again, any direct access to Walnut Grove Road from this development, straight from the development. There will be about 37 acres of total open space. Residential PUDs are required to have a minimum of 10%, with half of that being usable. The amount that they're identifying does appear to meet that requirement. So there's no buffering between these subdivisions. Again, between residential subdivisions, that's not something we would typically see. Mike's got the pattern book portion of that on the page. You see that they're going to have sidewalks on both sides of that street, setbacks that are listed, typical lot dimensions, etc. Staff is comfortable with the redesign of this subdivision. Again, the total number of lots is actually being reduced by about 2/3, and the character of the development is similar to what was originally approved. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff at this time? Doug, that's a large section of common use land, a really large section. Will it be kept? Will it be mowed? Will it be?
It'll be the responsibility of their HOA to maintain it, yes. I mean, a lot of it will probably remain fairly in its current state, but the applicant can speak more to that. But, the areas, especially that they'll be using, will definitely be maintained, but that'll all be under HOA ownership.
Thank you.
Chairman, I have a question. Doug, there's sort of an orange hash mark section. Looks like it's either an easement or a buffer of some kind that runs between the large chunk of the property and the part that's going to be developed. Yeah, do you see
that easement, I believe?
Yeah.
That's
They had it on a different page. Usable open space.
That's TVA. You're looking at you look at that yellow dash line. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, that's a TVA, yellow TVA easement.
Oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it looks like a portion of a couple lots may be impacted by that. Lot 7, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, they won't be able to do a whole heck of a lot with that. So that might just be better off as open space. But Lot 6 still has quite a bit of usable area. I don't recall if there's a line there or not, but yeah, Lot 7, they wouldn't be able to do a whole lot with it. We need to have the public hearing first. Sorry.
Other questions for staff? Ready for our public hearing? This time I'll declare the public hearing open for item number 19-A013, landdevelopment.com. Is the applicant available? Evening.
Evening, Rob Moulton, SEC, on behalf of my client. In regards to the question about the open space, we will be maintaining the open space as we should in regards to a development on that side. With that being the hydratic soils area back there, we're going to be kind of limited in what we can do back there. So it's pretty much been farm pasture with some patches of tree vegetation on that. So we're going to try to leave it as much as possible because it is hydratic soils. We don't want to disturb that as much as possible. We are looking at, as we get into this, looking at maybe adding some nature trails or something back there on that side as part of the amenity package on that. So we don't really want to get into disturbing that too much. So that's the reason why we came back with the amendment tonight on that side, was just the hydratic soils we found back there. So regards to the Lot 7 and the TVA easement, we feel that there's maybe some area for a house to go behind the easement on Lot 7. So we'll have to evaluate where that building envelope would fit in regards to what we found in the wetland study on that side, or the hydratic soil study on that side. So we feel there's an opportunity for a building pad back there, just be beyond the TVA easement on that side. So. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come forward. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners? Jim? We have a motion and a second to approve item number 19-A013 for landdevelopment.com. Other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6A2, 19-A015, Stewart Conway, location Burnt Knob Road. Commission district is 9, County Commissioner is Joe Gurley. Size of the site is approximately 3.7 acres. Tax map is 77. Existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. Proposed zoning is light industrial. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The subject property is located on the northern side of Burnt Knob Road. The property is adjacent to the Rogers Group Quarry, which is right to the north, which has been in operation since the 1980s, although it was under different ownership during that time. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property to light industrial in order to construct a future phase of a mini warehouse development approved for property adjacent to the east. Speaking of that property was subject of a rezoning from RM to light industrial, the same classification they're asking for this property, which was approved by the Board of Commissioners back in February of 2015. A site plan for the mini warehouse facility was approved by the Planning Commission back in May of 2016, and a copy has been included with your agenda packets. The Planning Commission approval for site plans are valid for 18 months unless the building permit is issued and they're making progress and work. As you can see, nothing's been done out there, so that site plan has expired. I also included a concept plan with your agenda materials, just to show you kind of some of what they're thinking possibly of the property. But as you can see, they're showing the primary property, which is the larger one, for a mini warehouse type development, but then the property immediately to the west is just shown as a possible future phase for that. I included the regulations for all mini warehouse uses that are located in our zoning ordinance. You'll see that on there. I'm not going to go through all that, but that just gives you an idea. If they were to go that route, that's what they'd be looking at. The property has a significant amount of slope which runs toward Burnt Knob Road. There is a drainage plan is not required at the rezoning stage, but staff has alerted the applicant to possible design challenges that this type of topography may pose. Staff has also spoken with the fire chief regarding the lack of water in this area. The fire chief feels that if the rezoning is approved, the proposed building should be designed incorporating firewalls. We have had conversation with the applicant also about the proposed zoning of the property. The applicant is seeking, again, light industrial, so he won't need a special exception from the Board of Zoning Appeals for a mini warehouse use. As you recall, when we see these in commercial zones, they're only allowed by special exception in those zones, so light industrial would be the first zone, if you will, that would allow it by right without having to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for that. If this rezoning application is approved, a Type 3 buffer would be required to be installed along all sides that are adjacent to residentially zoned property. This could be done using existing plantings or with a solid visual screen and plantings both. And of course, performance standards would have to be abided by. That being said, you can see the area. There's property directly across the street that was about a year ago that was rezoned to light industrial. Again, it is back up to a quarry that's been in operation for quite some time. I believe the applicant, or at least their representative, is present. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
What are your biggest concerns with this? Because you mentioned that in your notes.
Well, the biggest concerns we had, and I'll let Mike elaborate about this a little bit, is just the amount of, when we first saw the site plan come through, which wasn't the one that made it to the Planning Commission, they were looking at about 60 feet of cut into the property. Now, they ended up revising that to, I think it was about 20 feet, if I remember right. So that's some of the larger concerns that we have. It's just that amount of material being taken off the property. But again, I'll let Mike elaborate a little bit.
Even with the revised site plan, they were, I think it was around 30,000 cubic yards of material that they needed to take off site, haul off site. And so you're looking at anywhere from 15 to 2,000 dump truck loads of leaving the site. And it would take them several years to get that much material out of the property. So we were still kind of hesitant with the site plan.
Other questions for staff at this time? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing open for item 19-A015, Stewart Conway. Is the applicant here?
Chairman Phillips, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Round for the Huddleston Steel Engineering, here representing Mr. Stuart Conway. And as Doug mentioned, it's basically an extension of the program he already has on the current property. He would like to eventually do some mini storage on that particular lot, and this was that kind of, as Doug mentioned, is 3 acres, but it's kind of long and linear. It's adjacent to his property. Rogers Group is buying on the western portion of his property as well, so he's kind of getting surrounded by heavy industrial. So with that in mind, his intention is to, if the storage business goes, to continue that program element. As he starts clearing, he'll probably be using it more for surface storage initially, just to kind of start the program going. As far as the fill that's been brought up, that Mike's brought up, Mr. Conway's developing in other areas, so that fill's going to other sites where he'll be using that to build up a sub-base for other construction elements. So he'll probably pace out the construction, with his other developments to make sure that he's got ample fill on those particular sites. So with that in mind, I have any questions that you may have, but I just wanted to know he's basically trying to extend the program he has currently and just acquiring that adjacent piece of property. And as Doug mentioned, there's no water out there, so really it's going to be more of an option towards some mini storage or something with low flow-ish, like low flow requirements, if any flow requirements at all.
Any questions of the applicant at this time?
The zoning was approved in 2015 for the parcel on the screen there. You can see the one right to the south of the quarry, the light industrial. The site plan was approved in May of 2016. That site plan that's included with your agenda packet.
Is there a particular reason why?
Do you have an answer for that? Why nothing's been done yet? Let's come on, just get on record. Thanks, Steve.
I'm Stuart Conway, by the way. The original site plan elevated the base of the property a little bit too much above the roadway, and so kind of abandoned the property at the time. Didn't really like the original site plan, so we've come back and reconfigured a little bit. A little more, I think, a little more developable as far as being at the road level, instead of being 10 feet plus road level and U-Hauls coming in, stuff like that. We didn't want a big ramp going up, so kind of want to be road level. And
Thank you.
Clyde, how many loads do you say you're going to have to haul off?
How many loads?
Yeah.
I figured anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 dump truck loads. I think it's a little bit under 30,000 cubic yards of waste material that will need to leave the site.
And that's what I mentioned. His pace of construction will somewhat probably be consistent where he can distribute that material. So as he goes along and cuts, he'll be moving that fill to another location, ideally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? Seeing no one, I'll declare this public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve item number 19-A015 for Stuart Conway. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6A3, 19-A016, Dan Bobo for Mankin Point. Location is Shelbyville Highway. Commission district is 6. County Commissioner is Joe Frank Jernigan. Size of the site is approximately 115 acres. Tax map is 149. Existing zoning is a planned unit development. Proposed zoning is PUD amendment and portion to RM, approximately 3 1/3 acres. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The pattern book for this development, Woodruff Cove, was originally approved by the Board of Commissioners back in November of 2018. Since that time, we've also seen a preliminary plan for that, which was approved this year, actually, back in January. Most of the elements that you approved in that pattern book are not changing with this proposed amendment. The applicant's proposing to remove a little over 3 acres, between 3 and 3.5 acres, about 3 1/3, to be removed from the PUD and rezone it back to RM in order to transfer the property to Crossway Baptist Church, which is directly to the north of where that subject property is, or to the east, really, of the development as a whole. The transfer really just affects the residential density of the development. It's going from 1.74 to 1.79 dwelling units per acre, and the amount of open space, 60 acres versus now, which is what they're proposing, versus 64.4 acres, roughly. So about 55 to 52% really is what you're looking at. From 64.4, to 60 is what you're looking at. So the revised pattern book has been included with your agenda packets as a separate attachment. Beyond that, that's really the only change that they're talking about. The development itself has not changed. They've reworked some of the, like I said, the common areas, but beyond that, the development as far as what was approved by the Planning Commission at the preliminary plan stage is pretty much unchanged. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Pretty much all they're doing is donating a little over 3 acres to the church.
Well, that's what they'll be doing. Yes, not the county, but yes, basically that's what they're doing.
So, yes, they'll be donating.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for staff at this time?
Right. That was under the first one. Okay.
This time I'll declare a public hearing open for item 19-A016, Mankin Point. Is the applicant available, please?
Thank you. I'm Matt Taylor from SEC, representing the applicant. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I think Doug did a good job and described we're just donating 3 acres of land to the church. We're not making any other changes, nothing to the architecture, nothing to square footage, no additional lots. So it's really a simple donation to the church. But I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come forward. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve 19-A016, Dan Bobo for Mankin Point. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 6A4, 19-A017, Taze Lundy for Source Land. Location is Rooker Road. Commission district is 6. County Commissioner is Joe Frank Jernigan. Size of the site is approximately 170 acres. Tax map is 150. Existing zoning is RM, residential medium density. Proposed zoning is PUD, planned unit development. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. A portion of the subject property, namely parcels 3.03 and 4.0, Mike's going to pull it up on the screen here in just a second, were actually approved as the Stonebridge Estates planned development under the previous zoning resolution back in 2008. The approval was for 312 single-family lots with a proposed minimum 10,000 square foot minimum lot size and a minimum 1,500 square foot home. An amendment to that development was approved June of that same year that allowed a percentage of those homes to be at 1,200 square feet. Staff has included a chart of previously approved PUDs and their minimum lot sizes, home size, et cetera, for comparison, just to give you an idea of some of the ones we've recently seen around here. That's under the new ordinance, just to give you some comparison. The current PUD request, which is going to be called Old Mill Landing, included the two original parcels, but also includes parcels 3.01 and 27 for a total of approximately 170 acres. The applicant is proposing more lots. It's 423 lots with a minimum lot size of 5,800 square feet with an average lot size of 6,200 square feet. The minimum lot width will be 70 feet along the primary collector, which it goes pretty much as an extension of Rucker Road. You can kind of see that right through the, Mike's got it right there shown on the development. And the widths of those lots would vary from 45 feet to 55 feet for the remainder of the development. Home sizes would be a minimum of 1,200 square feet. They are proposing sidewalks on both sides of every street, and street lighting is also proposed, with the development. Additional details would be found in your pattern book. Again, that is on your iPads as well. The property is going to have access to Rucker Road at two different access points on the west side and then also on the south side. That road is actually, when you look at the county's major or long-range thoroughfare plan, actually shows kind of a realignment, if you will, of Rucker Road through the property, and this pretty much follows that. You can see that's going to T-intersect right at Rucker Road at the Wayside Road intersection. So we're happy to see that. There'll have to be some intersection improvements, and you can see those on the pattern book at the Rucker Road and entrance to the subdivision on both the south end and the north end as well, or the northwestern end, I guess. The applicant did have a traffic study prepared. We can talk some more about that. At the time, it wasn't available when we did these comments. We did receive it this morning and have had some opportunity to take a look at it. Again, Mike and I can answer more questions about that as we go forward with the discussion on this. Buffering is not typically required between residential subdivisions. The pattern book does indicate there will be approximately 70 acres of total open space in this development. PUDs are required to have, residential ones are required to have a minimum of 10% open space, with half of that being usable, which this appears to meet those requirements. They have beefed up that descriptions of the open space, some in their pattern book. We asked them to kind of beef that up a little bit, and they have done that. Performance standards, again, would not apply for this just because this is a residential development. Mike's got a list of the different development standards that are listed up there. Of course, with everything, new developments that we see, this would be a centralized mail delivery for kiosk. Streets would all meet the county's requirements as far as the design standards and things that go with that. That just gives you kind of an overview of the development. With that, the applicant is present, and I'd be happy, and Mike would be happy as well, to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for staff at this time?
All right, Doug, bear with me for a second. 2017 traffic count says 1,852 per day. You just got the new traffic count. Do you have an idea what the new traffic count says?
Well, we got the study. We didn't get the count.
We don't have a count.
Well, I mean, there's counts in the study.
Yeah, but we haven't had a chance to look at the 152 pages.
I'm assuming it's gone up. It's not any less than 852 a day. So,
Probably, I mean, you can't always assume that, but generally speaking, traffic in the areas, as the time goes on, does increase. But sometimes honestly, when I look at some of the historical counts on some of these, the TDOT, because these are TDOT counts that we look at, they vary sometimes.
Okay.
When you think they go up, they sometimes go down.
So it looks like we're waiting on a CUD confirmation of number of homes.
And we did receive that. We received the CUD confirmation that they can support the development and provide fire protection. This is also going to tie on to the sewer, the Murfreesboro City Sewer, and they have received approval for that. Actually went past through City Council this past week.
Okay.
So those items have been addressed.
Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
the notes on the pad need to be updated. So the 423 homes have been approved by CUD,
Correct.
and the city council has approved them to tap into the
That is
city.
correct. And understand, when we do the staff reports, of course, we didn't have that information. So when we do the report for the Board of Commissioners, regardless, we'll update all those. So, yes, sir.
Questions for staff at this time? If not, I'll declare the public hearing open for item 19-A017, Taze Lundy for Sourceland. Is the applicant available?
Yes, sir. Matt Taylor from SEC again, representing the applicant. I think Doug did a good job describing the project in general, but I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Doug's right. We did receive our CUD letter last week. We have gotten our approvals for as an outside the city sewer customer from the city of Murfreesboro, and then we did submit the traffic study as well. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question. The main road that Doug referenced, that's basically going to be an extension of Rucker Road,
Yes, ma'am.
I imagine that's going to become a heavily used road. Is there anything that you've had to do in planning for this neighborhood to prepare for that level of traffic?
So we, when we first, Doug and Mike brought that up to us. When we first submitted, we had just the regular size lots like we had on the rest of these. And so what we did was, in response to that, we widened out any of the lots that would front on that road out to 70 feet. That way it gives more room for turning on your lot itself. And that way, and that would, I think that reduced our lot count on that road by about 15, so it just simply reduced the number of driveways as well. So we did make several changes for that very reason.
My concern about the is traffic as well. When you have small lots and smaller houses like this, the garages are full. Parking, where are they going to park? They're going to park on the road. So the roads have to be wide enough for emergency vehicles to get through.
And we have, we've provided for county standard roads here. It's all has the rollover curb and gutter so that they can drive up on it. Also, all of our setbacks are at least 35 feet, so it allows for 2 cars to be parked in the 4 cars really to be parked in the driveway, in addition to what they can or can't park in their garage. So we absolutely understand that.
Doug, or Mike, while you have the pattern book right there, it looks like you're getting close to the exterior houses. What are our choices there? Can you read that fine print for me?
Well, they're showing, I mean, they're basically proposing a variety of material. You've got brick, vinyl siding, board and batten siding, vinyl shakes, different colors, patterns. They're not necessarily going with a specific amount of brick masonry or anything like that.
All right, so Matt, let me ask you, what have you and the developer determined in regards to the front face?
So on page 16, we've outlined our percentages. So on the front, we've set a minimum of 20% masonry. I thought we pulled that from the old PUD that Doug mentioned earlier. And then the remainder of the buildings could be vinyl.
My apologies, I missed that on the front end.
And the pictures on page 17 of the booklet are actual real-world pictures of homes that my client's client has built within the last 6 months.
So distance between buildings are approximately what?
There'll be a minimum of 15 feet between buildings. We've got 7.5-foot side setbacks on everything.
Other questions? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Somebody help me with the name of that giant vinyl subdivision in Laverne that's been in there for about 15 or 20 years, Lake Forest. Here's my concern. 423 houses jammed 15 feet apart, and more than likely all vinyl, other than a minimum 20% stone on the front. 1,200 square foot minimum. So basically these are looks like they're aiming for the starter home market. I'm just really concerned what 10 years down the road this thing's going to look like. In a Rucker Lane narrow road that we're not sure when it's going to be widened. And you've just put a brand new school down the street, basically, down the street, and you're going to put 423 homes there. I'm not sure I want this kind of a vinyl sided kingdom at this condensed. I don't know that we've ever done I see a chart here in our report. I don't think we've ever approved anything with that narrow of a lot, 45 feet.
With the exception of a couple of the multifamily developments we've seen, I mean, those would be a little bit different, but I didn't include those necessarily in here just because it's not really apples to apples. But as far as the closest thing we had was Clearview Acres, which allowed for 47 feet at the right-of-way, and also, I'm sorry, there was another one, Walnut Chase, 47 feet at the right-of-way, but wider at the minimum building setback line.
Based on the elevations.
And 42, I'm sorry, 42, and Clear Creek allowed for 42 feet at right-of-way, but that was in the cul-de-sacs, I believe. So, sorry.
On the elevations that I see, based on the narrow roads, based on the narrow lots, based on the fact that this is going to be a heavy vinyl, dense community, I'm trying to picture it 10 years down the road and the maintenance of a vinyl home, and it's going to look like that giant monstrosity in Laverne that everybody cringes when they drive by. So I can't support it.
On the comprehensive plan for the city, it says that their 2035 future land use map shows this as being a suburban estate in nature. What does that mean? I saw the map, but I don't know what that term means.
Yeah, I mean, well, suburban estate typically is larger lots. Now, I couldn't tell you exactly how large. Again, this is really just more for reference, just to show you what the city has. We can't really base a decision on it necessarily. But in the counties, you know, obviously it's more of a, you know, it's more in the, not the rural area necessarily, but the suburban belt area, which is, you know, the typical density we see. So, but, yeah.
Tanya, this might be for you. Do we know when they're built this close together, even if the exterior is vinyl, is there any sort of a firewall or anything that has to be built that's going to delay the amount of time that a adjacent property could be affected if one of them's on fire?
So there is some fire rating requirements that come into play when the house is 5 feet or less from the property line.
I expected the vinyl would melt. My question was really more penetrating the next house. I didn't know if there was something that had to be structurally had to be there that would prevent it from penetrating that house. But of course, I guess it could go in through the roof or any other way, but I was just curious. I expected the siding would go, but I didn't know about if there was anything else code-wise that would protect those neighbors.
Not code-wise, no.
To address a couple of those concerns, I believe the code will let you go to 10 feet apart. Obviously, in the county, we want everything 15 feet apart, regardless of what those side separation requirements are. And the streets inside the neighborhood will be wider than the normal, what you see on Rucker today. So we'll be building this to a city as well as a county standard with those setbacks or those sidewalks along all sides. We could upgrade the materials on the fronts to be an all masonry front, and that would be a mixture of brick and stone and cement board through there. And you're right, I mean, this is aimed toward a workforce housing. Affordability is a real issue. As far as the lot width, I really think that Doug mentioned Clearview and a couple of others that were in that 47 range. Those are largely driven by the fact that those are on step tanks. I've done the layouts on those, and you cannot fit everything that you have to fit in the separation. And the reason we have proposed the narrower lots here is because we're on the sewer. We're able to squeeze a few more feet out of that. And really, it allows us to condense the neighborhood to provide, I think we've got over 40% green space or open space that'll be available for the neighbors, our residents in this development. That's one thing that you can't do with the larger lots. And I know that the county's a little different in that it relies on a volunteer fire department in some instances, but I know in the city, even with the vinyl, we have had 10-foot setbacks before in regards to the fire. So I think it does protect the structure even at the 10 feet mark. I'll be happy to answer anything else while I'm up here too.
Like Mr. Taylor said, we did receive the traffic study, but we need to work with them a little bit more on the traffic patterns and destinations. But we're, we've got a little time between Board of Commissioners and the Planning Commission, but a lot of their traffic studies said that most of the traffic was going west down Rucker towards 231, but we feel that with the new school site to the south on Sledge, we're going to expect a lot more traffic leaving the site to the south, going wayside down to that new school complex, and then also I would assume more traffic heading east towards the Epps Mill interchange. They had most of the traffic going towards 231, and they had a large portion going towards County Farm Road, but I don't like traveling down County Farm Road myself, but just because of a couple, the railroad junction where it's a blind crossing essentially, and then you've got a one lane bridge that you have to cross past the community care facility out there. So I don't know if it would get as much traffic as they anticipated using. So we would like to look at more traffic going, especially in the morning with the new school opening in a couple years, 2021. I expect a lot more traffic heading south than what they're showing. So we're going to work with them on that. And
They did recommend some improvements, but I'd like to see how the whole distribution would coincide with other developments. There's another development to the to the west that we need to have them look at as well. And then the potential increase in density of Buchanan Estates to the southeast. All those factors will play into this.
So Doug, what would the density be at its current zoning?
Well, you mean if it were zoned RM? Okay. If it was zoned RM, of course, that's about 2.9 units per acre. So if you took, in a perfect world, if you took, well, let's get my calculator here, sorry. So it's roughly 3 units an acre. So if you're looking at 170 acres times 2.9, which is what actually is the calculation, you'd be looking at about 493, roughly. That's in a perfect world, of course. Yeah, and that doesn't take into account roads and easements and all that. You would obviously never get that much, but and detention and all that, right? So, I mean, you're talking less than that. Now, the original, when we talked about in the comments before the public hearing, the original development on this, now it was a little bit smaller. There were a couple of those tracks that weren't part of the original development, but they were looking at about 312, and they were a minimum of 10,000 square feet. So, that gives you probably a better estimate as to what you'd be looking at for that. But yeah, you'd never get the bulk density that you could get out of it.
Doug, will you go back to that schematic you had just previous from the...
This one? Tree, yeah, a lot of this is floodway and floodplain. So a lot of this back here, they wouldn't be able to build in anyway, back here. Yeah, you could use it, walking trails and whatnot. House or no, nothing in the floodway. Nothing above the surface in the floodways. Yes.
Yeah, it could be counted, well, either as just regular open space or as usable, depending on how they structured it. You could use it as either. Correct.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, that is.
I've heard some of the comments and what's been said here, and if there's one thing we continually hear within the housing market out here is how Rutherford County has left affordable housing. And a lot of the housing that we have here, as far as a young couple when they get ready to start, as far as individuals that come here and finding the house that they can't afford, or they have to go somewhere else to find that house or whatever. And I think the developer mentioned there that these are what they called working person's houses or something of that type. And I've heard my commissioner talk about the fact of the vinyl houses or whatever. I have to tell you that when I was first beginning, I built the vinyl house. And I'll never forget, as I was very proud of that house, as I was building that on my 5 acres and whatever, and my boss wanted to go see the house I was building, and we went out there and looked at that house, and he come in, he looked at it, he said, "This is a vinyl house." And I'll never forget the way he looked at it and looked at me, and that same sort of statement come across. And my statement back to him said, "Well, what you're paying me, that's all I can afford right now is a vinyl house." I see a lot of good-looking vinyl houses they're right pretty. And I'm not going to knock them all that bad in what we're trying to say right here. I think what concerns me about as much as anything is the number of individuals and the traffic that we might have here as far as this housing is concerned. I even saw just recently on Facebook, somebody said what we're needing to do in Rutherford County is once again to start putting in a lot more trailer parks and things of this type. But I don't think we're getting to that point right now of doing those sort of things. But I think by his statements of saying we can put more masonry and look at that, and I think what we've heard here from our engineer that we need to be looking at maybe some things there as far as the traffic is concerned. Maybe in this situation for this development right here, we need to take another look at it. Maybe tonight's not the night of bringing this one forward. So I'm just wondering if anybody else has this feeling.
Yeah, the fact that staff only got the traffic study this morning, and they'd like to take more of a look at it, and I had actually shared with Matt similar comments as Commissioner Cush, in that, you know, we always talk about livability, and we want to make sure that these neighborhoods are going to age well. And so I don't want them to make a decision off the cuff, you know, either. I completely agree, you know, affordable housing, we talk about that all the time. You know, how much house can, you know, a first-year deputy or a first-year school teacher, how much can they afford? And so we, you know, we need to be meeting the needs of that population. So to make a good decision, if nobody's rushed here and they've got time, and I would really like to see staff really address those traffic issues, because like you said, even if we don't do the PUD, they could, you know, put a large number of people, of course, on 170 acres. So I would be comfortable with a deferral if the applicant is. I don't know if they are or not, but.
I'm going to make a motion to defer until till staff can have ample time to review the traffic study.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to defer item number 19-A017 for Sourceland LLC. Other comments? All those in favor of that motion to defer, please say aye. Is there any opposition? Motion to defer carries. If you would, Doug, explain the consequences of deferral.
Yes, sir. With a deferral, which you have the ability to do. Now, plan developments are handled a little bit differently. The Planning Commission says shall recommend approval, denial, or approval with condition within 60 days of the initial consideration of the application. It says the applicant may waive the 60-day time requirement and consent to an extension or extensions. Now, with this, our bylaws also do allow the ability to defer an application for a certain amount of time. Now, this is not an unlimited amount of time, but I mean, I would anticipate within 30 days we'd be able to bring something back to you without much of an issue. I mean, because now that we've got the study, we'll be able to spend more time with it. But yeah, I think we'll be able to meet the time frames within this that are granted. Thank you.
Thank you. So with this deferral, it will not go before the County Commission in September.
That's correct.
Let me just go ahead and mention that. All of the rezoning requests that come before this board tonight are scheduled to be heard at a public hearing before the County Commission on Thursday, September the 12th, 6:30 p.m. in this room. Anything else we need to cover on that particular agenda item? Okay. Anyone else have a comment? Item 6A5, 19-5002, various amendments to Article 2 of the Rutherford County subdivision regulations. Our planning staff is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is our final item for you tonight. You'll recall back at our July 22nd meeting, we presented several amendments to Article 2 of the subdivision regulations. most significant changes involving the validity time of approved final plats going to 1 year from 180 days, and allowing some right-of-way dedications to be handled administratively, namely those that are prescriptive easements, and they're coming in, their deed goes to the center of the road, and when they're subdividing, we just have them dedicate that as right-of-way, since they're not really using it for much of anything anyway, because that's where the road is. The remaining changes that are in here are procedural, and what we feel would be more housekeeping in nature. I'll be more than happy to go through all of these amendments again, like I did back at the July 22nd meeting, if you'd like. If not, I'll be happy just to answer questions. Article 1G of the subdivision regulations does require the Planning Commission to have a public hearing, prior to the adoption of any amendments. This has been advertised properly. They do require a 30-day notice for changes to the subdivision regulations, which we did advertise timely. So also the approval authority for amendments to the subdivision regulations resides solely with this board. These regulations and amendments will not have to go forward to the Board of Commissioners. So if whatever you decide tonight, if you decide to approve these, they'll be in effect tomorrow morning when we come into the office. So again, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have before or after the public hearing.
We've all been through this. Is there any questions at this time for our staff? If not, I'll declare the public hearing open for item 19-5002, amendments to our Rutherford County subdivision regulations, Article 2 in specific. Anyone wishing to speak? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second to approve 19-5002, various amendments to Article 2 of the Rutherford County subdivision regulations. Any questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Other business, Doug?
Don't have anything. Mike, do you?
No, sir.
Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, August the 26th. That will be a 9 a.m. meeting in the planning mess. We've had some discussion tonight on a huge development, mostly starter homes. Doug, is there anything in our regulations if a investor wanted to come in and purchase 30 of those homes as rental homes, is that permissible?
Yes.
Okay.
We have nothing in our regulations that really goes into any detail regarding ownership as far as that goes.
So some of these, this property could end up being rental property, could be.
Could
possibly.
Correct. I mean, it's like that really with any, even established subdivisions that are out there today. If somebody wants to sell their house and they sell it to a company who just wants to rent it out, there's really nothing, I mean, we have no way of enforcing anything with that.
And just to follow up on what Commissioner Cush said, I was in Laverne today and went through that development, and there are cars parked on the road, and I'm not saying on front of every house, but on quite a few of them. And a school bus had a difficult time, a large school bus had, in my mind, a difficult time getting up and down those roads. So questioning that, I think, is appropriate. I also heard the applicants say that our roads, that these roads would be wider than those and shouldn't present that kind of a problem. These roads will also be county roads at some point in time, correct?
Yes, these are all to be public roads.
So if there is parking in the street,
I mean, there's nothing in the zoning that really dictates one way or another. Now, Mr. Brooks may have some comments on that, but from a zoning standpoint, there's really not much we can enforce with that. Yeah.
I see Greg still in the audience, and maybe when this comes back, if you could have some comments on parking in the street and what type of issue that may or may not cause. Greg, just your input there next time this comes forward, okay? Ron, did you have something?
I was whispering with Charlotte, but I'm happy to share. The neighborhood that we're looking at is not a Lake Forest like you just had up there, but it did bring to mind, there's some design elements that you could work into a neighborhood like this to address traffic and to make it, a little more aesthetically pleasing. And it would be things like incorporating roundabouts. So if we have to have wider roads, we know, we've talked about this in the past, that the wider roads sometimes encourage speed, but if we think we're going to have wider roads to accommodate street parking, then perhaps we incorporate roundabouts to slow them down, because they're going to have to slow down to address that. So, and then you could have a decorative element, in the middle of that roundabout if you wanted to. But so I'm just saying there are ways to work with all the elements. We just need a little more time, I think, to put together a more appealing plan than the one we saw tonight.
Any other maybe message that we as a commission could send to the developer here as to what we would like to, some of us would like to see, and if that could be incorporated into his plan? Is there anything that any of us would like to communicate tonight?
That being said, I mean, not to interrupt, but I'm just saying, if nobody had any comments tonight, if you think of something, obviously in the meantime, after the meeting, feel free to give me a shout, shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to, relay those to the applicant and their design consultant as well.
Doug, how many houses are in Lake Forest?
Off the top of my head, I sure don't, ma'am. I'm sorry. I don't.
And I know there were some planning conversations that were, in hindsight, they had to end up having their own little mini police precinct, put in there for safety. We had to end up subsequently building schools basically at the very back of that neighborhood to just accommodate the children out of that neighborhood. So what this developer does will directly impact, the county as a whole, and whether it be our major thoroughfare plan or whatever. So anything we can do in partnership to not have those hindsight moments, I'd like for us to take, the 30 days or, however long, and just get it right on the front end.
And I will say that, as far as the long-range transportation plan was concerned, again, they were incorporating a portion of that in their development, which we liked. There was also some talk about the possibility of looking at some sort of a fire EMS station on some of their property that wasn't usable, but after further discussions with our public safety director, it turned out it wasn't in the location they really needed. They were appreciative of the thought, but just didn't. It just wasn't going to work for them. So, they were thinking down those lanes, if you will.
One last thing that I will add that you just made me think of that I didn't say was another hindsight thing that Lake Forest wished they would have done, or the leaders in that community wish they would have done, would have been pocket parks or something to break up. So like, for example, on this one, all of your green space is on the perimeter. There's really almost none on the interior. So if you don't live on the outer edge, I'm talking about the one that we saw tonight, then you don't really get to enjoy that green space unless you make a point to travel to that location. And if you're going to do that, then of course, you need parking if we're going to put in trails or whatnot. So again, those are all the kinds of things that need to be thought through as we put this plan forward.
Mike, did you have something?
I have two things. One is in response to a statement you made earlier, Mr. Chairman, in regards to a large development where a company could come in and buy and then rent. I know in a subdivision my wife used to live in, fairly close to your house, their HOA had strict restrictions about subletting. You had to own, or you couldn't live there. If
owner occupant
rented, you got a letter and it was like a cease and desist. Now I don't know in the court of law how much teeth that really had, but man, they sent out letters, and sure enough, if renters moved in, they were notified right away that was against homeowner association. So maybe there's teeth in that, but I don't know how you put that in play. But and second question to Mike and Doug, and maybe to Greg if he's still in the audience. A committee, an infrastructure committee is about to be put together come Thursday night at full commission. And so I have a question. Do roads have a capacity limit in terms of number of cars? I mean, like, I know no water lines do, I know sewer systems do. There is a finite number of vehicles on a road. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, but it relates to the level of service that it provides.
Does the county road book have those kind of numbers, or is that just you have to look at it with a traffic study?
Look at the delays in moving traffic and, intersection, how long it takes to travel through an intersection. Those are some of the delays that how you rate the roads.
So let me ask you this question. If we were to look at Mike and Mike's subdivision, right, and we were going to put 250 houses on a county road, and Pettis asked the question as a planner and said, okay, I know this road is kind of busy and you're about to put 250 homes on it. Where are you on the capacity of that road? Because, there's a subdivision on this end already, and there's a subdivision on this end already, and now you're wanting to add 250 more homes. So you're going to add whatever the math is. One home equals X amount of
10 trips a day, typically.
Okay, so you're going to 250 or 2,500 trips a day. Is that right? Is that my math? Okay. So you're going to use up that much capacity on Greg Brooks's road, right? So Pettis is going to say, as a planner, Mike and Mike, you should pay for some of that capacity. You're taking it away, so you should pay for that. So can planning, can the highway department come up with a number of what that capacity is, and we could say, Pettis, you're exactly right. Mike and Mike are going to add 2,500 trips, and that should cost them X amount of dollars because the road costs us this much, and they're going to take away this much capacity. So X minus X equals Y, and they need to pay Y. Do you follow me?
Yes, sir. Any tool you can give us to put in our toolbox would be much appreciated. Right now, the only tool that I have is the traffic studies that rate the level of service. That's the tool I have. Or safety concerns. Is it a dangerous road? Is it too narrow? Is it, certain things like that. But that all relates back to the level of service.
It's generally not the straight parts of the road where it's all free flow that's the problem. Most even two-lane roads have a lot more capacity than most people would realize. Where you end up having the problems are at the choke points, like the big curves or the intersections, the signalized, whatever. That's why so many of our traffic studies, when we have developers do them, we have them look at intersections that we know are already problematic or that could be problematic, because that's typically where you're going to see the problem. It's not as they're just driving along. That's generally not your issue. When you're driving it's probably not the best example, but when you're driving on the interstate, most of the backups that you are seeing, a lot of it is volume related, but it's because you're just there's people trying to get off at a certain interchange, and that's backing up, in which people are getting on at the same time. You start having those choke points throughout there. That's generally where your problems are going to start. But
we've all said in this room for years and you said, okay, this subdivision is going to trigger a stoplight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's break that down a little farther away from the traffic light. Let's just say this stretch of record that they want to put 423 homes on. When do we say, whoa, 423 homes is too much? If you want to do that, we're going to expect you to pay X amount to improve the road, because you are taking away this much capacity. So
just,
You want to take that capacity across some years of the builders. But where can we get to that point?
through the county commission. Yes.
But do you have, I guess, do you have the tools and the data on the fly? Is there some book that says Rucker Lane
Can handle, no, sir.
7,000 trips?
No, sir. No. You look at the width of the lanes, if it has shoulders, I mean, are there roadside ditches? Are they a hazard? The vertical, horizontal curvatures of the road? I mean, there's so many things that factor into the safety of a road and the capacity of a road. So safety is one thing, capacity is another. So we have to look at all of those. But there's no list that says Rucker Road has X capacity, and with this subdivision, it has Y capacity. So I wish we did. I mean,
Well, safety obviously is important, but we're all upset about capacity. We're all tired of sitting through 5 stoplights.
yes, that's part of the level of service that the traffic study evaluates. How long does it take to get through a certain intersection? And the longer the wait, the lower its rankings.
So I'm not picking on this site, but the traffic study that you got this morning will give you some idea. I mean, I'm not telling you, I'm asking. Will give you some snapshot of capacity of Rucker or safety or volume, or what will that ultimately give you? What will that traffic study tell you that says, or give us that says, man, you just can't, we can't put that many cars on Rucker?
Well, it evaluates the way the road is now, a snapshot of the way the road is now. It looks at the way the road is now and a little bit into the future. And then also it looks at if you add this much, this many trips to this road network. So it's saying, okay, right now it's got a capacity or a level of service, whatever. And a few years, based on standard growth, it's going to have a little bit worse level of service. But if you add in the mix this development with 400-something homes, it's going to have even more challenging level of service, longer delays. So they say, okay, to offset this development needs to make certain improvements. Certain improvements typically are, like Doug said, at intersections. Turn lane, dedicated turn lanes, and eventually a traffic signal was warranted. So that's some of the things that we have to rely on to say, okay, it's got this level of service. If we add this into the mix, it reduces the level of service. But to offset that, we have to ask them to make improvements to the road. But I wish I had a list that could say, this development, this road network could handle X amount of cars. I'd love that.
But next door to Mike and Mike's subdivision, there's 280 acres that we know
Yes.
a year from now,
Yes.
there's going to be another
Right.
300 homes.
Yes. Now, and we went down this path a few years ago with the traffic sheds. We were looking at, well, what could this particular area, like a watershed, how much can the capacity of it? But it was, we, discontinued that study.
All right, more to come.
Yes, sir.
We'll look better answers next time.
I wish I had the answers, but there's only so many tools in my toolbox right now. So I need a bigger toolbox. I need some more. I need, some Craftsman tools in there.
Thank you, Chairman. Anything else? I'm not sure what our mission long-term is, and that may have some bearing on a case like this, and maybe some feedback from our staff and even our legal department about planning short-term versus long-term. And I think that's one of the things that Vice Chairman Cush was hinting at a little bit earlier. You know, if you have a $100,000 home, is that home going to be worth $100,000 10 years from now or 20 years from now, or will it be less? And are we doing our jobs as far as long-term planning by not looking at something like that, and should we? So if there's room for us to make those type of decisions, I'd like a little feedback from staff and legal on can we possibly make some decisions based upon what we think is a good or maybe not so good long-term plan. So maybe that's also some feedback.
Lots of folks think we have detriment to the value of their homes by the things we approve.
I don't disagree, but you know, there are some things that we mentioned. Starter homes, and I know, being on this commission for more years than I like to think about, we've approved thousands and thousands and thousands of starter homes in the past. Are those still starter homes, or are those people moving on, and who's moving into those quote starter homes? So, you know, I think there's more to this than just we need more starter homes, because I think that at some point in time we had a world of starter homes in this county, and what happened to those? And are they still considered starter homes, or are they not anymore? So, you know, there's some things I think that we probably going through some of our minds. Are we thinking this thing through long term? So I think this discussion is fruitful and would require probably a lot of good input from our staff and from our legal department too, as to what we can and maybe even can't be looking at. So thank you for your participation in this discussion tonight, and maybe we'll be better because of it long term.
And if I can add just a couple things to that. I mean, these are the kind of ideas, as you know, we've had money approved in our budget this year to start a comprehensive plan update, as well as our long-range transportation plan update. You know, that's hoping to get ramped up here in the next few months. We'll see how that all plays out. We're still kind of working through what the details are going to look like, but these are the kind of ideas we want to hear. You know, what is this going to look like long term? And I can speak at least for the starter home that I live in that I bought 20 years ago. I bought it for a little over $102,000, and the last time I had an appraisal, it was close to $200,000. So I can say my starter home, and it's still a starter home, has increased in value, you know, just over the 20 years that I've owned it. Actually, the bank, I guess, technically owns it still, but you know, that being said, but these are the kind of things we want to hear. You know, what do we want Rutherford County looking like as we look to the future? Housing affordability, housing issues, that's something that's gaining national attention. I mean, the National Planning Conference this year was in San Francisco. I was lucky enough to get to go to that. And if we think we've got issues here, I mean, you talk about housing affordability there, you're talking one small bedroom apartment, basically like an efficiency. You can't even say it's a one bedroom. You're talking somewhere between like $2,000 to $3,000 a month for rent on those things. A 2-bedroom apartment is like $5,000. It's insane how much it costs. And this area, I think there's a lot of concern, you know, about affordable housing. Affordable housing doesn't automatically mean it has to be unattractive or it has to be, you know, low quality housing. It can be affordable and still be attractive. I mean, like I said, I live in a vinyl sided home. You know, I like my home. You know, does it need pressure washing? Sure. But, you know, it's a modest home, and I like it. So there's a place for that. There's a place for larger home. There's a place for the middle class, if you will, the working class, the application we looked at. Those are all things we need to consider as we move forward with the planning process. But, you know, affordable doesn't automatically have to mean low-income housing. I think that's where a lot of the mindset of people goes. When they hear the word affordable, they automatically think it's going to be subsidized or something like that. That doesn't have to be the case.
Thank you, Doug.
Doug, I want to add on to that just one thing. I think you're right on point in terms of the affordability of homes, because I know when I joined this commission 12, 13 years ago, if you would have brought a plan up here for 2-bedroom homes, we would have pulled our hair out. We would have pushed back, and nobody brought that up tonight. Nobody batted an eye at the idea that these were going to be 2-bedroom homes. That's a way you help make them affordable. And I think we do need to continue to have the conversation about low-income houses versus affordable housing, but then also trying to be smart about, are investors going to come in and buy those up, and are we meeting that need? So it's a broad conversation that needs to be had through all of that. We also need to strive, and I think you just said it beautifully, we need to strive balance. And I don't know how we do that, how we try to drive that as planners, but we need balance. Yes, we need the affordable homes, but I don't want to only build the affordable homes and become the affordable home neighborhood to Williamson County because they're building all the high-dollar houses. You know, one of the reasons that they don't have to raise their taxes is you know, like we do, at the pace that we do, is because the average amount of a house in their county is much higher than ours. Their yield is much higher than ours. And so we have to be smart about that too. So it's a complicated equation, and you know, I think we all know some of the pieces to it, but definitely all those things need to be part of that conversation as we go forward with that, updating that comprehensive plan and that thoroughfare plan. And I think one of the things, Commissioner Phillips, that you kind of alluded to that we've always sort of stayed away from, and that is the idea of any kind of design guidelines for this committee. We've never looked at design guidelines. The only time we look at design guidelines is when it's in a PUD.
Yeah, and the reason that is because as a county, we're extremely limited in what we can do. We're not, as I understand the law, we're not even allowed to have design review boards in the county. So that's a lot of the reason. Yeah.
So those are all the pieces that we need to be talking about.
One of the things that we're faced with this type of development now, it's a different time and age we live in. In the 90s, 80s and 90s, we were doing larger subdivisions because of the septic systems. And we may have done 200 lot subdivisions, things like that. But they were spread out. They were developed on roads that handled less traffic, but they had more exit and entrances to the area. In this case, city sewer, we're faced with 7.5 foot side setbacks, 400 plus houses in one little spot on a section of road that can't handle it. So these are things that are causing the problems that I see, that when the step system started, it got more dense, and now with city sewer reaching out into our areas, we're faced with this type of situation that we have to deal with.
Thank you. Don't want to continue to beat on a dead horse. If we're done, we're done, okay? So once again, thank you for your participation in tonight's discussion, and I know we haven't solved anything, but we were at least able to say some things that are on our mind and should be on the mind of a lot of citizens as we continue to grow at the rapid pace that we're growing at. And us as planners, what do we want our county to look like 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, or 40 years from now? And now's the time to make some of those decisions. So thank you for your participation. Anything else? We're adjourned.